Well, everybody, I am delighted to welcome my good friend Rosalie Dace to the guest creative spot for October. And I've known Rosalie for a very long time. She's internationally known fabulous teacher and quilt maker with very heartfelt work, has juried exhibitions and has a long list of credentials. And I don't usually deal with all of those formally, but I do like to thank Rosalie for being here and ask her to tell us what she would say if she were introducing herself. Welcome.
Well, Jane, yeah, thank you. It is such a privilege to do this and to actually be able to see you face to face and meet up with you again. So thank you. I'm honored and pleased to be here. Yeah, Jane, that's quite a difficult question because it varies. What does it mean to be an artist? How would I introduce myself? Well, I think basically I would say I make stuff out of textiles mainly because I can't not do it. I draw and I'm very visual. I enjoy seeing and sharing what I've seen of objects and light and color around me.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Mm-hmm. So
that's not it.
Okay, I love it. I'm wondering what sort of creative phase you've been in for the past 18 months. How's it been for you? It's the elephant in the room if we don't talk about it. How COVID has affected us individually as artists.
Yeah. I think it absolutely is the elephant in the room, and I think it's affected us all differently. I must say, I was stricken with a sense of fear about not being able to create when I saw people had posted things like, I made 500 masks in one day, or I made all these quilts and look at what I'm doing. And there seemed to be a franticness. And I think that was a kind of a normal reaction. I found I kind of closed down quite a lot. We all had to. South Africa had some of the strictest lockdown laws anywhere and the earliest. And I found that what I took to doing was looking. I've done a great deal of photography, and I had to move in a way out of my studio. It's a separate building behind the house. The computer's in the front of the house. So I had to change my way of thinking. I don't think, it's not a bad thing to change the way you think. So I'm certainly aware that I have become more visual, if that's possible for an artist to say. And I almost switched, I'm going to say not entirely, but a lot of my thinking to photography and light. I've done quite a lot of drawing. I have been, in a way, quite scared. And I think and scared of not doing the creative stuff on the one hand. On the other hand, I knew perfectly well I could still do it. And I think you in your creative strengths training, which is such a valuable, I'm going to say product, a valuable facility for people, is that you have dealt with and understand that notion of being stuck and what if. But on the other hand, you can't not do the work. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's that. It was a kind of a closing down on one hand, a fear on the other. But of course, I went on in different ways. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So well, I think that's one of the most important lessons that we learn when we work for a while, is that we can keep on going even when we don't think we can keep on going. Yeah. And I think that's an important life lesson. It's not just an important art lesson.
Absolutely. And if you are a creative person. I believe all people are creative in different ways. Your creativity is going to show. You can't not be creative. There may be a temporary hold on it. It's like treading water, you know, but in fact, it's going to show in some other way. It may be that, as in my case, because I was confined, a lot of people have been much more confined than I have, but we have a walled property, which is normal in this part of town, with a small garden, and I've absolutely loved looking and photographing and drawing and thinking. And I also do a lot of writing, Jane. I use too many words. I get told, my kids have told me quite often, enough, too many words. Yeah. So the words are an important, for me, a jumping off point very often. They're not for everybody, I know, but for me they are.
Yeah, I can relate to that completely, because they are for me as well. So I'm curious whether the photography and the drawing is for its own sake, or whether it leads to new quilts, or whether there's a hybrid there where it's for its own sake, but you can't separate it from quilts.
I think that a lot of it has been for its own sake, but of course it's going to come out in what I make with fabric, because I see it all the time in the combination of colors and line and texture. I mean, that's what we work with, color, line and texture. And in looking back at what I've photographed and what I've made, although I may not consciously have sat down and said, oh, I like those colors, therefore I'm going to make a piece of it. I look at something and it's almost as if your eyes are like sponges, and they take in and they take in, and eventually your brain gets fat and full, and I always think of it as leaking out down your arm and out the end of your fingers. So you look at it and you think, oh, yeah, I didn't think about it at the time, but that's what I photographed 3 months ago, or whatever, you know. We can't help but be influenced by what is around us, I think, you know, taking it in that way, you know. Yeah, so I don't know what I'm going to do with all the photographs. The photograph, you know, and I have a problem filing them, and I'm hopeless at it. But I need to do a better job with that. But I really have enjoyed that. And yes, absolutely, it will come out in the quilts and so on. Yeah, yeah. So.
Well, it strikes me that it would be beautiful as a book or an exhibition where the photos could be juxtaposed with the textile pieces. So
thank you for that idea. Good idea. Yes, yes.
Good thought for that one.
And I'll say thank you, Jane Dunnewold, for that for that.
No need. I have to ask about a specific piece, because the piece behind you is so beautiful. I'm wondering what inspired it. I'm looking at the one that has over the other shoulder.
Yes.
To the right of the brown piece, that one.
Oh, that. Oh, okay. Yes, that is called Here and Now, number 2. Because it came out of an idea of designing and focusing on the here and now. And that's actually based on a plan of my house and property. Okay. And it, you know, it's one of those things where it doesn't, I don't say it doesn't matter what it means to somebody else. It was very meaningful to me. And it's a plan of the house. I know where the gravel path is. I know where the little red framed window. I do actually have a red framed window at my front door, which I painted red because the bay window in our bedroom was in danger of, it really needed fixing and was in danger of falling out.
Oh, no.
So in my head, red was pay attention, pay attention. It was an emotional response to the color. So I made that with little red windows. After that, I painted a little window at the front door red, and I've since painted my studio windows red. They're okay. They're not falling out, any of them. But from that grew this is where I am here, this is where I am now. And I actually like the idea of placing yourself where you are. I'm actually, yeah, I'm going to do more pieces based on that, because we've been at home. All of us have been at home. In some places in the world, you can go out more than others, but it's our security, it's what we know. In terms of the aesthetic, it's the shape that we live with. And of course, there it was the emotional impact of the red window. Please, let's fix it before it falls out. Yeah, it was that piece. So it's called Here and Now. The strip down the side, which I'm not sure if you can see on that one, there, yeah, was actually, okay, this is the truth. A strip cut off on another quilt that kind of was too much, didn't work, but I liked the strip. It was blue African sky and so on. I thought, that'll work on this piece. So that's got a little bit of the past in it as well. That piece actually belongs now to a friend of mine who's in America, and I've got to find a way of getting it to her, but it's Here and Now, based on my own home, yeah, which nobody else would ever get, and it's okay. But you know the story of the red window now.
Okay, I love that. Well, and I think that's a really important reminder, because so many people think that they don't have anything to work with, they don't have ideas to work with, or they think too literally about something, and they don't think about how they can abstract it because they think people should get the story.
Yeah. I think, something, and I'm sure you find too, is that people sometimes feel they have to wait for inspiration. No, it's there. It's there all the time. It's around us. It's what's meaningful for us. And I think one of the problems that I have that I would like to do with my work, my biggest challenge for myself, is actually simplifying. I tend to get too well, I think I get too much in it. And so I try very hard to look at the very basic shapes that we're looking at. And they're, geometric or organic or symbolic or, representational. I don't want to slam the viewer with saying, this is what you have to think and see. That's their own idea and privilege. But I write a lot before I do a piece of work. And I know there are a lot of people who will say, they'll pick up a piece of fabric and think, I've just got to do something with this. That's fabulous. I tend to start from a concept. I start with, what is it I'm trying to say or communicate? Why? The what, why, where, how, and wow. So the words, I find that helps me filter. It tends to get rid of extraneous stuff. Yeah. So yeah, and I think you're absolutely right in saying there are people who think they have nothing to say or nothing that they can build on around them. And everybody has. First of all, you've got your own story, whatever that narrative is. And whether it's, look, I'm sitting drinking tea while we're talking, whether it's, and that's not my favorite teacup, but you could have, your favorite cup, your shoe, your something that is meaningful to you. Everything is a possibility. Yeah.
And you're the only one who has to know what that connection is.
Yes. Yes.
Because then, I don't know how you feel about it, but I think that there are two parts of this process. One is that I know what the content is, and I may or may not decide to make that obvious to the viewer, but I've also got the side that's always aware of balance and composition and the piece being effective visually, which kind of stands on its own, doesn't it?
Yes, yes, it does. So, because regardless of whether that's my house or the favorite cup or whatever it is, we are visual artists. We happen to be mainly visual textile artists and quilters. So it's got to hold together visually as a piece of visual art. And I mean, if we think about some of those old order Amish quilts, for example, which were functional as well. I'm thinking of the Pennsylvania ones in particular. I mean, those were visually, aesthetically stunning, which was separate from their function as well, and any content in terms of color that the maker may have put in. So I think you're absolutely right. There are two sides to that,
Yeah,
So,
one of my most favorite possessions is a quilt that my friend Nikki Burnett made. I don't know whether you ever crossed paths with Nikki at QSCS, but anyhow, it's a queen size quilt that she gave me as a wedding gift, and it is visually stunning. And it's even more delightful that I literally can sleep under it. I don't have a wall big enough to hang it up, but it looks great on the bed, and I admire her even more because it goes both directions, which is really neat.
Yeah. I'm saddened when people say things like, "Oh, I only make, or I just make traditional quilts," or whatever it is, because so many of those are visually beautiful and speak of time taken. It doesn't mean that obviously that they're all aesthetically, that every piece is aesthetically stunning, but I think it's sad when people minimize what has been done or what they do. And I think it's more about self-esteem very often than anything else. I don't know what you feel about that.
Well, I do. I mean, one of the things that we talk about in creative strength training is what I refer to as the committee. And the committee is the critics.
Yes.
And a lot of the time they're outside and saying things like, well, what are you going to do with that? And well, you can't put that on a bed. And, and so they're dismissive.
Yes.
And then we have this unfortunate ability to internalize that really well. We don't necessarily internalize the good stuff people say, but we're really good at internalizing the crappy things people say.
It's funny, why do we do that? And we remember, the bad things, and it's almost as if we're embarrassed to kind of remember or hold on to the good ones. And it's really hard for people to say, I did a good job. And it's so refreshing when you find somebody who says, hey, you know what, I'm really pleased with this. I'm really happy with this. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I think that gets somehow, at least in this culture in the US where I live, I think that gets taken away from us and sort of tamped down, because my granddaughter Zira comes every Sunday morning, and most of the time we paint because it's one of her favorite things to do. And recently she was painting, and she really concentrates, and she doesn't want me to talk to her while she's painting. And she finished a painting and she held it up and she said, "That's fabulous." And the crowd went wild.
Love that. I love that.
I thought,
That's,
there's no
yeah,
way I'm going to do what was done to me,
no,
you
no.
know, when my father brought the
Yes.
hammer down on that kind of behavior.
Yeah, yeah. Because they thought they didn't want you to get a swelled head and
Exactly.
didn't want you to be puffed up.
Yeah.
And it's a very hard balance. It's, I think of that sort of, it's like, walking a tightrope, and you think, I've got to keep that balance and not fall off, but just keep going,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and also to know that as adults, we know not everything we do is going to be wonderful. We mess up, we do things, and you think, no, yeah, but it's not giving up in spite of that, What do you do when you do a piece that you think, nah?
Well, first of all, I'm a terrible record keeper. So I have literally had the experience of putting a piece up for sale on my website. This is a while ago now. And then a few weeks later, I decided I didn't like it. So I cut it up, and the next day it sold from the website. I didn't have it anymore.
No, no.
And it's really, stuff isn't precious to me. I mean, maybe it should be, but it really isn't.
So so it's the process,
Mhm.
isn't it?
Mhm. Mhm. What do you do
I-
when you make something and then you don't like it?
I kind of go on to the next thing. I do finish things. Sometimes it takes a while. And I think to myself, okay, if this was one of my students, what would I say? And generally I'd say, okay, so what do you like about it? What was good? What got you going? And then sometimes you turn it upside down, or you turn it back to front, or you just change it in some way, But I often think about, there's a lovely quote from Kay Fassett, who said, whatever you make will be something wonderful because it did not exist before. And I really like that. But sometimes you do things and you think, no, that wasn't so good. It really wasn't. What else? What can I do to change it? I know I've turned pieces, sideways, upside down. I've cut them up, yeah, and you just try not. You don't give up on it utterly. Sometimes this has to be left to rest for a while, and then you come back to it. But at the same time, I think we have to balance. When I say left to rest, don't just put it and walk away from it, because then I think, no, I'm just giving up on that. If we do that, then things sometimes don't get brought to completion. And every piece that doesn't get brought to completion stands the possibility of perfection, whatever that is. And I think that sometimes by not completing things, we are avoiding making a decision or a commitment. And even if you cut it up and sell it off your website or after it's been sold, that's so funny. I love that story. Okay, well, did you just have to say, oh, sorry?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Or the other thing that I do when something isn't working is I spackle it.
And yes,
I've had pieces where somebody wanted a piece in the former state that it was, but now it's been spackled and it's a whole new piece.
Of course, that's a different piece.
So I don't know. I just keep. I guess I have never counted on making income from work, and it's partly because I'm so schizophrenic about it. So I just try to be a good teacher instead.
I was going to say, because you're an educator, that's what it is. And it's not about the product, it's about the process. Of course, the product's important. We've talked about the fact that we want it to be visually engaging. But in fact, it's the getting there that is really important. I made a piece once in memory of my father, who was this giant presence in my life, and I loved him and I miss him and think about him every single day. And I was able to part with the quilt. Somebody said, how could you part with that? You made that in memory of your father, this amazing person. And I said, yeah, but I made it. That was the thing. It wasn't literally the finished product was nice. It was a good piece. But it was the making. It's the process. Yeah. So that's good too. That's what we do.
Yeah. And I know I have a room upstairs full of stuff that's stacked up on shelves, and that's even having had some decent sales over the course of my lifetime. But when you work a long time, it gets to be a little daunting to see how many pieces that you have and to try to sort out what to do with them.
Do you have when you are, I'm going to say, experimenting, working through a process, do you have a size you like to work at? I'm not asking in inches. I'm just saying a more or less size. Because I tend to, for those little experimental pieces, I work fairly small. Also, it was so that I could transport them easily, as hey, here in classes, here are some things you could do, here are some things you could try, you know. And I find I've got lots of those. They're little pieces like this, and I like to encourage people to just try some of those little pieces, any one of which can then be developed or extended into bigger pieces. And I mean, my pieces tend to be the finished pieces about the size of the walls behind me. But for the experimental processes, is that a word? Processes, whatever. I work fairly small, so that it's fairly low risk. You're not, you know, spending weeks on this masterpiece. That's you're just doing a little bit of experimenting and investigation.
Yeah, I pretty much work that way too, because of course the way I got started with this was printing cloth, and I had to work on something that was large enough to see how the patterns would come together, but I didn't want to commit to yardage until I knew.
No, sure.
And same thing is pretty much true now, although I have intentionally decided I'm not going to work as large as I used to work, because most people don't have that kind of wall space. And I think that my original intention for working a lot larger was frankly driven by the observation that many of the big deal quilt shows really wanted work and preferred work that was larger as opposed to smaller, because it had more presence maybe. I think there was kind of a bias against that, against smaller pieces for a long time. And I do think that you have to work about the size of what you're working, which is, given my own devices, that's about the size I would work. I think it's partly because that's a size where you can realize what you have in your head effectively, as even though I totally agree with you that the smaller samples, I recommend that all the time, because it becomes sort of a library of what you've tried, what you know how to do.
It absolutely does. You used an important word there. You used the word intention. I've been very engaged for a long time, but I'd say particularly in the last 18 months or so, in the whole intention of the artist. And that comes up with, so what am I doing? What am I trying to communicate to myself or anyone else, and why? And I think this is part of the whole question we ask ourselves about, what is an artist? Why are we artists? And the artist's intention about who you communicate with, yourself or the viewer, and how much your intention is to engage the viewer. It comes back to that duality that you talked about, where we communicating something and investigating the content for ourselves, and the aesthetic or the visual on the other hand, So yeah, it was I was interested you used the word your intention, because I'm thinking a lot about that.
Yeah, and I think that actually, in a way, brings this conversation full circle, because you started by saying that when you gave your own introduction, by saying that you make because you have to make. And I think many of us have that sort of gut level intuitive knowing that we have to make. And I think it's really a fantastic thing to morph that or grow into a place where you want to understand it better. Yes. You know you have to make, but you want to understand it better. And that's when you start really focusing on the intention.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah, and I think that understanding that you just have to do it. There's something that happened when as a child, I drew on every wall. I drew in every book. Whatever surface there was, the best was to creep behind the refrigerator with a red wax spray on. That was great. And there's a story that my brother told me about the fact that he'd complained to our mother again that I had drawn in his books again. And she said to him, "That's right, she drew in your books again, but don't ever stop her. Rosalie must draw." I wish I'd known that before she died. I wish I could have said to her, "Thank you for understanding that." And I want to say to more people with their children and grandchildren, so it's a coat of paint on the wall. It's, just let the kid do it.
I love that. Yeah. Good. Well, I've got far too many white walls in this new house and a big box of paints and a granddaughter. So here we go.
There you go. There you go. Interesting to see how far they start creeping up the walls too, and how they change.
Right up the stairway. Oh gosh, Rosalie, it's so much fun to talk, and we need to wind it down, but I'm so grateful that you've been here today. It's just absolutely delightful to catch up again.
Thank you, Jane. That was great. I look forward to the next time that we can catch up and seeing what you do with your creative strength exercise. They're fabulous.
Good. Well, I know each other again in person, and I look forward to it.